so that we can
Yeah, it's
maybe
10
see
o'clock,
everybody?
so let's officially start.
Okay.
All right, so welcome everybody. We don't have every single one of our guests signed in yet, but we'll go ahead and start because it's 10 o'clock. So, it's my pleasure to welcome everybody to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Ayres. This is a personal perspective for her 100th birthday. And I just want everybody to know, today is not the actual birthday. Her actual birthday is July 18th, 2020. But, our webinars were on Wednesday. So I didn't want anybody to think we didn't really know when her birthday was. We do. But this is a special celebration with friends and colleagues of Dr. Ayres, people who knew her personally and in different capacities, as colleague, as friend, as mentor, student. And so during this special 2-hour webinar, we will conclude our Wind Down Wednesday series. And we are going to break this up into 3 parts, just sort of generally. We're going to talk about Dr. Ayres, the woman, the scientist, and the visionary, and kind of going forward. So Zoe, or wait, we got to do our toast. So let's do our toast to Wind Down Wednesday and to all of you. So cheers. Yeah.
Cheers. So I'll just add that, we are so honored to be part of this international community. When Suzanne and I started Classy, we really were committed to so many elements of Dr. Ayres' work, scholarship and mentorship, but also partnership. And the partnership that we have internationally is really the lifeblood of what we do. I just thought it might be a good time to mention that, the Classy logo that Suzanne's son developed for us, we love our logo. It comes from, I don't know if you can all see this painting in the back. Maybe later I can grab it down, but it's a magnolia painting, a watercolor that Dr. Ayres painted. And we thought it was a great symbol for our organization because it symbolized new growth and buds coming off the branches, which is what we see happening with her work all over the world. And so we're just so happy to have such a vibrant community. And we started these Wind Down Wednesday gatherings so that we could all stay connected and feel positive about moving forward during this unusual time. And we hope everyone has enjoyed them as much as we have. So, Suzanne, are you going to introduce our guests, or how would you like to go?
I am, and I'm going to make a quick request to Katie. Katie, can you send Sharon the link at her Gmail address? I don't think we want to send it to everybody, but, but I was going to just send it really quickly. So let me just send it. Sorry about that.
We're actually still waiting for Diane too. Maybe if you're sending it, Katie, you can go ahead and send it to Diane, and maybe Steve also.
There's Sharon. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
Oh, she got in. Okay, cool. All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're so honored to be able to provide this tribute to the life and legacy of Dr. Ayres. And what started as the tireless work of one brilliant woman has become an international phenomenon, and it never ceases to amaze me. So I get weepy, and I'm going to try my hardest not to. So today, I had thought, we want to celebrate Dr. Ayres, but my mentor Ginny Scardina would have said it's about the body of knowledge. And so as much as we want to celebrate Jean, we want to celebrate the body of knowledge that is sensory integration, because it's a springboard for the future. Whew. So let me introduce our guests. These are wonderful friends who are joining us. Sharon made it. Dr. Sharon Sturmack was my thesis advisor for my master's degree. She was my dissertation advisor for my OTD at USC. I love her so much. And she, and she's wonderful beyond that, and such a scholarly and amazing and
I love you
resilient
too.
human. Oh, yeah, and just amazing publications, and has always had one foot in front of the other in terms of her, you know, how she's managed. I don't know how you've managed actually, Sharon, with all of everything, but to continue to do your work in such an amazing way. Gina Coleman is a clinician extraordinaire. She sent us a few little clips from children talking about Miss Gina, and hopefully we'll put those together. But Gina's amazing, and I wish I had Gina's brain for constructing a clinic and all of the mathematics that go into that, but we've known Gina forever. And Päivi, you did the most amazing program in Finland, and you were early working with Dr. Ayres. But each of you, hopefully you'll, when you contribute, I hope that you'll tell us how you met Dr. Ayres, what your relationship was, and a little bit more about yourself. Dr. Sue Knox, you were there very much in the beginning, creating the original certificate program, and you know, one of Dr. Ayres' best supporters really early in the game. And of course, you went on to have your own accolades in your career, and you know, a very famous OT. And Lorene Kovalenko, my dear, dear friend, and you were one of Dr. Ayres' good friends. I might not be able to say more. Okay, that's that. Shay McAtee, Shay baby, where are you? I'll get through that a little easier. Also another amazing clinician, educator. Steve Lina was a past executive director for Sensory Integration International. I hope he's joining. I don't see him on here yet. But anyway, hopefully we'll get that worked out. And Diane, is Diane with us yet?
Diane's working on it.
Okay,
We just
Diane
sent her
Parra,
the link. She's trying to get on, so hopefully
Okay.
we'll have her soon.
Dr. Diane Parham, of course, you guys know her from, you know, decades of research working with Dr. Ayres, and a long-term commitment to sensory integration and work on play and her assessments and fidelity and everything else. So anyway, welcome everybody. You know, I thought, you know, with starting, you know, our first section about Jean as a person, as a woman, Lorene, would you mind starting and telling us a little bit about your perspective? You probably knew her the longest. And you've got to unmute. There you are. Oh, unmute.
It's at the bottom. There you go. No, bottom left.
You got it now.
I got it now.
You got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm probably the oldest, so I don't know if I've known her the longest. I haven't known her the best, but I thought I'd tell you what happened the first moment that I met her. And you remember, some of you will remember the old buildings that they used to have at USC, the old wooden buildings that were, her office was on the top stair. So you had to walk up the back stairs, and I was applying for the master's program, the last one that she taught. And I remember meeting her and talking with her, and I think that it was probably about the time that somebody mentioned Mary Riley, who was also part of that. She was running the something. She was there, or she was going to come in, and suddenly Jean Ayres turned pale, like white as a ghost. She was covered with sweat, and she sat down on her desk, and I could see that she was in horrible pain. And something happened.
You're still here.
You can
Okay.
see me?
Yeah.
I can't see you, but anyway, I'll just keep talking into a blank.
Okay.
Excuse me, I'm confused because I'm looking at a blank page. Anyway, so she was covered with sweat and I could see she was in pain. And that was the first time I really saw in meeting her for the first moment how much pain she had, how fast it came on her, and that she fought through it. She kept talking. She never hardly lost her space. And it was amazing. The next time I saw her was when she was telling me, I'm getting very confused because I'm not getting any feedback.
I wonder, Lorraine, look on the bottom left and where it says video. I wonder if you hit that, it should not have a line through it. It should.
Video. I hope this is wrecking your show.
No, it's
no,
fine.
you're-
It's fine.
And we can
You're
see you
fine.
just
Yeah,
fine. I know
we
that's
can
got to be
see you.
confusing.
Yeah, but I can't see you
If you go
post
up
Zoom.
to- if you look at the very top of your screen, you have some options for view. And there might
View.
be something up there that says speaker view, and maybe that would help you.
Yep.
But-
Speaker. Nothing's happening. It's
Yeah.
so weird.
Well, we can see you and we can hear you, so.
Okay. All right. So I'll keep talking in my confused way. And the next time that was significant is I remember this. Now we're in class and she's teaching. She came up to me and she asked me if I realized how dyslexic I was. I'd never heard the word. And she asked me, please never to give her test because she knew I'd wreck it and make a mess and get all the numbers confused. And so I agreed. She said, what you have to understand is how the implication of the test and what the numbers mean. Just never give it. Don't ever, you have to promise me you'll never try to give it. So unlike the rest of you, I never gave her tests and I never treated in a formal Ayres clinic. Okay, so I think maybe I've said enough. I should pass on. And
Lorraine,
yes,
let me tell you that I'm gonna sign you off and sign you in again, so
Okay.
we'll be able to see everybody, okay?
okay, that's very wonderful because I like
Thanks a lot.
Sure, okay, just don't panic because it's gonna go off and on again, okay?
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
okay.
I think what Laureen just shared, like just tells us how there's a role for everyone in this work. And even if you're not going to be using the test directly or treating, I mean, Laureen's contributed in so many unique ways to this work. So we always hope that everyone finds a little inspiration in these sessions.
Oh, Lorraine, you need to turn your mic on.
Oh, she's back.
Thank you, Shay. You're always rescuing me.
Did it work?
Yep.
All
Yay,
right,
Marco.
yay, you're
Thank
back.
you, Marco.
Down.
You're welcome.
Well, you know, one of the things that you had said when we were talking a little bit ago was that you saw Jean as a wounded healer.
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Jean had reflexive crying, not like you're crying, Suzanne, because your crying comes from some emotional flooding that you're having. But Jean would just spontaneously cry. She would just flood up and cry, and I noticed it teaching. And the other thing is that she had every one of the disabilities that her test differentiates. So she overcame all those growing up. And so she had a really difficult childhood. She had a difficult time with her mother. I know that Jean was very tactily defensive, and that's hard on a parent as well as the child. So she could never be comforted. So she had this kind of endless, she also had loss of stomach enzymes. So she was always feeling hungry and starving, had a lot of stomach pains. So I don't think that there was a day in her life that she didn't have pain of some kind. But I remember visiting her in the hospital after her mastectomy, and I asked her if she had any pain or how much pain she was in. And she just laughed. And she said, "Oh, physical pain is nothing compared to emotional pain." So
Wow.
I never saw her. I think she had pain all the time, really. And somewhere that gave her this, maybe an extended, I don't see auras or energy fields, but I think she had an extended aura that children who were also suffering felt. And so children could feel comfortable in her company in an inexplicable way. So she had a kind of magic about her.
Mhm.
Yes.
Well, and I think we saw some of that magic. I wondered, Gina, if
Yeah.
you want to talk a little bit about your experience with her.
Well, I can vividly remember the first time I met Dr. Ayres was when she came to a class that we were in school, and she was lecturing. And I came into the field not knowing anything about sensory integration, and then to meet her in person and listen to her lecture. And I was so struck by all the research and writing she had done. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a math major, so writing isn't something that comes very easy to me. And when my eyes got really big looking at all this wealth of publications that she'd done. So I thought I'd ask this little simple question of, so did writing come easily to you, Dr. Ayres? And she took a long pause and she said, "No, I struggle with every word." And I can't tell you what a sinking pit that made in my stomach, that here was a profession and someone that was so knowledgeable, and that she'd achieved so much, but had to struggle with each step of the way to get that information shared with everyone. And I think part of I know that the topic was on research at the time. So it just made me feel like even if it wasn't your strength, you still weren't going to be able to just pass that off to somebody else. It was going to be important for you to take up that torch and figure out how to make that happen. So I know she must have put a lot of effort into those words, because you felt that when she was talking. She was always so, chose those words really carefully, how they were going to come out. And she was a little bit, I would consider, on the reserve side, but approachable. But being as young as I was in the field when I actually got to train with her, with actually Sue Knox was in my class and Shay, I just tried to look as intelligent as I possibly could. Well, that was my goal, try to at least look intelligent. And her biggest gift to me, I think, in all of what she gave us during that 4 months was how to read a child. I felt like her ability to sit down and just sit next to you and just really watch what this child was doing and how they reacted to the little nuances that you might introduce to them, and how you could read that and further investigate other issues that might be brought up because of that, was something that changed my way of looking at children and other people forever. It's something that I'll carry with me also. I think often we get caught up in these little logistics of, did I do it quite right this way or quite right that way? And at the time I was getting certified in the Southern California sensory integration test with Jean during then. And so she was observing me giving those procedures, and I was doing PRN with a child, and I thought I'd gone just a little too fast with one. I didn't think I was as smooth as I could be, and I just couldn't let it go. So I called her at home, if you could believe that, afterwards, and I apologized to her. I first came saying that this is Gina, and I just want you to know you've spent your whole life developing these tests, and I can't even spin a kid 10 times to be able to do this correctly. And I just want you to know I'll work on this till it is smooth like clockwork. And then I finally shut up long enough for her to be able to respond. And there was a long pause, or at least what I felt was a long pause. And she said, well, actually, Gina, I think you did it very well. so then you felt like, okay, never mind. Let me just hang up now. So she was so gracious and so took you where you were at and really didn't expect you to become her. She wanted you to develop your own therapeutic tools of using yourself to best connect with the kids. And out of all the things that we do with kids, if we can't connect with them, none of the other things make any sense, is my belief. So those are probably the two biggest things. That thing about working hard, even if it's something that doesn't come natural, there's still things that have to get done, and then that connectedness with the kids. So.
There was an article that I read from her. It was, maybe it was in a letter. It was in the archives, and she said, she was talking about the American OT Association, that the American OT Association should support any OT who writes, because writing your thoughts down is really difficult and it's really important for the profession. So I think you hit on a point for her that was so critical for her.
Yeah.
Right. If we were going to get any place further, we've got to be able to have the documentation and research to back it up. And she gave us all those gifts, not only the research and the theory, but the being able to evaluate it and then being able to treat it. And when you talked about me being in charge of clinics, just what it takes to run a clinic in itself, I still am completely mesmerized that one person was able to do all three of those things at the same time. And train and be training therapists coming in constantly too. So it really is mind-boggling.
It's so interesting, Gina, because you're saying that, feeling that kind of support that Dr. Jean said, you were doing great, you're doing great. And that's really embedded in her theory, isn't it? Like the supporting the child and support. And it seems like she was acting like that to everybody that was in her surrounding. Did you feel like that? Did you feel like that was her way of, live her theory, or was that so embedded in her that has to?
Oh, I think she saw everything in terms of her theory. I agree, Marco. I think she figured out what it was that needed to happen and then how best to go about it. Her way of describing it might be different than some. I remember when her husband came in and she was going to give him directions of where she wanted him to go to pick something up. And rather than say it's on this street, she said, okay, I want you to walk down 2 blocks and then I want you to make a left-hand turn and then I want you to go. And he said, can you just tell me what's the address? I'm telling you where it is. So I mean, everybody has a different way of how they're processing things, and I think she was really key with that. She would always talk about saying, think about what it feels to be in their body. For the kids, think about what it is to imagine what they must be feeling like right now. And again, when you're in this training kind of situation where you're looking at, how am I getting them to do what I want them to do? She would take you back into what was really important, was getting their view of it so that you could support them as best as possible.
And Gina, just in answer also to Marco's question, I always talked to her once about, I don't know what we were talking about, but she said that during the first month of, first of all, for everyone else to know, her office was right off the clinic base. So she could see everything that was going on in the gym. And she said, during the first month when the therapists are here, I just feel like I have to stay in my office because whenever I come out there, they all look so nervous. And we and then I remember the same thing, Gina. After I did my SIP in front of her, which was, I mean, SC sit, which is crazy. I walked into her office and I was just like steeled, and I was like sort of fighting back tears because there was this whole, 2-hour session of knowing that she was watching me. And I saw her look up, she's looking down, she looks up at me, and I don't know what she was going to say, but she just stopped and she said, "You did really well." I thought, I'll have to ask her later what the truth is,
Yeah.
because right now she knew I couldn't handle it.
Suzanne, can I speak a little bit
Sure.
about those days?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because I knew Jean, again, in different roles. In the beginning, I got involved with the education committee for CSSID because she really needed funding for her research and was not getting it from anybody else. And so we started the courses and things. And so I knew her for many years really as the researcher and the scientist and all of that. And then I took 610, and I took it, after many, many years at Children's Hospital with Shay and Gina. And again, the thing that stuck with me was Jean could look at a child and know exactly what that child needed and how to do it. And they're saying the same kind of thing. She just had that way of analyzing a child and knowing what they needed and kind of, again, getting inside the child. And so that's something that I think has always stuck with me, especially as we've been teaching treatment and things, because most people, don't get down at the child's level and do what the child is doing and bring them out of it. But she really impressed me with that. And a couple of the other things that she said, I remember at the very kind of the end of her actual lecturing, and we were sitting together in the audience, and somebody else was speaking, and she kind of said to me, she said, I think things are all in the right place now. So she felt very comfortable with those of us who were teaching and lecturing, that we were passing on her information in a correct way, and she was satisfied with that. And then the other thing, this may actually go over into the scientist, at the very end of Mary Riley's life and talk, she had a session at a CFOT luncheon with Jan Montesquieu and Linda Flory that were moderating questions. And one of the things she said in that lecture was that Jean Ayres was the only true theorist in occupational therapy. And it just, I kind of blew my mind at the time because of the fiction between the two ladies, but I think she really admired Jean and maybe was jealous of Jean because Jean was so successful with the sensory integration. And I told Jean about it afterwards, and she acknowledged it, and in her very quiet way, and didn't say anything really more about it. But those things, I think, kind of brought a lot of how Jean was together for me, and how she was thought of, particularly at the end of her research in her life. So.
So many of the things that are being said here really do get to sort of the heart of her personality, which, a lot of times people ask us, will tell us what Jean Ayres was like. And it's a hard question because she was so much not about her ego or herself. It's, she was not about promoting herself. And so I think what we're hearing from everyone is that she in a way put people at ease by shifting the focus away from herself as a well-known person, an icon, but shifting it to why we were all together in the first place, to help the children, to understand the children, to focus on the work. And I think for me, that's one of the main lessons I came away from my time with her is, just trying to keep the perspective of why are we doing what we're doing, and to try to set aside the ego and power piece. And ironically, the ego and power piece circles her work all the time. There's always this
Yeah.
this tension,
Mhm.
but really that was not coming from her. It was something she was trying to push aside. I appreciate you all bringing up those points.
You know, Sharon, you were talking about how Ayres persisted with her education. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Okay. Can I talk about you first?
Me? Yeah. Hey.
Well, when I was a faculty member at Boston University, I had this graduate student who handed me her thesis proposal. Now, those of you who have worked with me know that usually you do 10 drafts, 15 drafts, 20 drafts before I say, okay, you're good. Well, Suzanne handed me her proposal and I critiqued it and wrote comments on it and handed it back to her. That afternoon, she handed it back to me and it was perfect. And I said, okay, you're good. I remember it so clearly. She is the only student I have ever had who has been able to do that and who has done that. So congratulations. I don't know if writing comes easily to you, but you're good at it.
Thank goodness.
Thank you. Well, the subtext on that is I was really motivated because there was a little party I had to attend and I had to get there. So that, you know, that's right. So that part of my personality has thanks, Sharon.
And some of the
Intrinsic
things,
motivation.
some of the things I remember about Jean is I was an undergrad when her work first came out. And so I was really, really impressed with her theory, the way she was looking at child behavior, the things that she was doing. And then I went to graduate school after that. Ann Henderson was my mentor. And Ann was I think a colleague of Jean's at USC. I believe that's what the relationship was. Do you know, Sue?
No, I didn't know
They
that.
were either classmates or colleagues, or I'm not quite sure.
Wow.
But Anne was hosting a conference called The Body Senses and Perceptual Deficits. And I believe that was in the 1980s. And the idea was to have the leaders in sensory integration come together. Sue, were you there?
I think I was, yeah.
I think you were there. And I was a graduate student at the time. And it was like all the top leaders in sensory integration. And Sue and Ann Henderson and Sharpie Howsky, Shirley Stockmeyer, Jane Coriel, trying to remember who else. Leela Lorenz.
Dottie.
And it was just amazing. And I was a graduate student at that time, and 20 graduate students were allowed to sit around the circle and listen to these phenomenal, esteemed OT leaders. And we weren't allowed to say anything, but we were allowed to sit there and listen. And it was like one of the most awe-inspiring times of my life. I can remember it so clearly. Well, at the end, they started talking about how can we support your research? And they came up with the idea of starting this Center for the Study of Sensory Integration Dysfunction. And as a graduate student, I wrote out a $25 check and was the first person to contribute to the center. I remember that. The other thing I really remember is a couple of other things. When Ayres presented at conferences, and people would ask questions like, why didn't you do blank, blank, blank? And she would always say, that's for you to do. There's still so much research that needs to be done. This is what you need to do now. I'm giving you your path for the future. And so many people took her up on it. And she inspired so many people to continue their education and to continue to do research in sensory integration. And then the other thing was that when I was presenting one time and I was talking about Jean Ayres' work at a conference, and it was the time that we used overhead projectors, not computer screens. And I was writing on the overhead projector. I saw Jean walk in. I froze. I turned around and finished what I was writing on the screen, on the conference screen, in blue indelible magic marker that stayed there for the rest of the conference.
I can feel you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I also was going to just comment, and Gina said it and other people have said it, is Ayres would always, always say, I wonder what the child is thinking. I wonder what the child is feeling. I mean, I think all of us have remembered that piece of her. I'm done.
And she didn't just do it by intuition. You might think, oh, she just had a gift. She had piercing observational skills. In fact, I remember the first time I met her, she looked at me and I was like, well, of course, almost started crying. But she just asked me, well, how are you? And I was like, whoa, but she meant it. Like, she was like diving deep into my eyes, and it wasn't just a frivolous, she really was asking me about how I was, and in a way that it was not superficial niceties. And she knew, she could tell, like, are you okay, or you're not, or the children, and how the therapist matched up with the children. And she would come and she would use her presence to modify a therapeutic scenario. So it wasn't pure intuition. I mean, not that you guys are saying that, but she was piercingly observant.
Can I jump in here just to say a little bit about her relationship with Franklin? Because I think it's important for people to know who didn't know her that she had a very intense and strong relationship with her husband, Franklin, who she met late in life. Maureen might be able to correct me, but I think she was in her 50s when they married. And I think that's also a lesson, is that she knew how important it was to have that kind of a support person in her life. Franklin did. He was a retired engineer and photographer, and he made equipment. He did all the cooking, all the cleaning, and he really afforded her the chance to focus on her work. I remember that she would say that she worked 6 days a week. She worked Monday through Saturday, but then she saved Sundays for Franklin. And I think that's also just a lesson from her life of the importance of having people around us who give us unconditional support and love in that way. And it was such an important part of her life, at least at the latter part of her life. So I just want to make sure we mention Franklin.
Yeah, and one quick story about Franklin. As Gina mentioned, Jean came off kind of reserved and would really, listen to you quietly and respond. And I was in the office, and it was during OT 610, and it was at the point when I could still only call her Dr. Ayres. I couldn't call her Jean yet. And we all know when that moment happened. And I'm asking her a question, and this guy walks in that I had not met yet. This guy walks in that's dressed in like jeans and a khaki shirt, he was the gardener. I always saw him out there working, and I was new. I didn't know who he was. And he walked in and he says, "Hey, Jeannie baby." And I thought, what? Who is this man? And that was another thing about Franklin, that he had this lightness about him. And when he said that, he goes, "Hey, Jeannie baby," and she just turned and beamed. It was just nice that she had that sort of side to it.
Yeah. They truly were soulmates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they met in the 40s, and I actually went to dinner. It was an amazing honor. Franklin and I got to be really close after she died. I was helping him with a lot of stuff, and we had worked together at the clinic, because when I was doing repairs, he would help me out and kind of loan tools to me and stuff. So we went out to dinner together, I think it was in April, which would have been their 20th anniversary. He asked if he wanted to celebrate it, and could we go out to dinner? So it was sad, and it was very sweet, but that was it. They were married about just almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Diane, I don't think we've heard any of your stories. Do you have any stories before we leave this first section?
Sure, of course, because hearing all these other stories brings things to mind. So I would say that my relationship with Jean was very formal, and it was really pretty intellectual, actually. I mean, I would ask questions about the theory and you know, what do you think is happening here? But I do want to share a story, and it's probably a universal or almost universal experience to feel pretty insecure when Jean Ayres is watching you treat.
Yeah.
So, yes. And so I had many of those insecure moments, but one that I remember so clearly, and some of my students have heard this. So if they're listening in, yeah, you might have heard this story before. I was working with this little boy in the clinic, of course, as an OT 610 student. But I had worked, by the way, I had a background in mental health. I worked in psychiatric OT full-time for 4 years before I moved all the way across the US because of the opportunity to study with Jean Ayres. And I had some wonderful mentors in my basic OT program, C, later Kay Walker, and then Shelley Stowers. They were in my field work to experience. So I appreciate looking back those early teachers because they knew of Jean's work and they were accurate in what they told me. You know, so I had that background that was helpful. But so this one day, going back to my story, I'm working with a little boy who really was very, very active, tended to be disorganized, practice difficulties, impulsive, generally disorganized. So, you know, organization of behavior was a major concern with him. And this one particular day, I was in one of the treatment areas and nobody else was in that area. Jean was in another room, you know, helping another therapist. And this little boy had an idea that he wanted to climb up a ladder really high and do something, get something down. So I thought, all right, this is a little bit of a stretch for him. I think it's going to be okay. So I was standing back and watching him really carefully. And Jean walks in the room and I have this like sudden angst, you know, about, am I doing the right thing? Jean Ayres is watching me right now and it looks like I'm doing nothing, which is actually you're observing. And of course she'd been teaching a lot to just observe carefully. You don't have to be doing anything, but I still had that insecurity. And I moved forward and she must have read me right away. She said, before I could take another step, she said, "This is therapy at its finest."
Oh, good.
Oh, which was like, oh, I was just about to mess that up. But I like to share that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you do have those, especially in the beginning and you're still learning and you're uncertain and you're feeling insecure, you know, just, you know, use that clinical reasoning and stay with it. I think there's a lot of us have that feeling we have to be doing to the person, you know, at whatever age you're working with, all right? But remember, in our profession, what we're going for ultimately is the person is able to organize a life that's meaningful, right? And that's productive, meaningful occupation. And the only way you're going to get to that is letting them be in charge as much as possible. So I think that's whatever age group, you know, you're working with. But Ayres was truly a pioneer in appreciating that. And it ties in so tightly with the research that's come out over the years on brain plasticity, right? For brain changes to occur that are positive changes, the organism has to be active. You can't passively move them or try to control their activity, and that is not going to produce the gains that you would hope for, the change in the organism's actual ability to function. So that plasticity, you know, it all ties in with the active engagement and the active control by the organism. And by the way, I did mention that one of the last times, I think it was the last time that I saw Jean and met with her, and she was really about to back out to retire, and she passed away shortly after this. But I told her, Jean, I was in my PhD program then, And the earliest constraint-induced studies had just come out, and they were, and it was all, I thought it was all about that plasticity, because what they showed was when you constrained the, good limb, they produced strokes in little lab rats. But that if you let the animals, they tried different treatments and compared the different treatments. And the only one that really worked in terms of improving, dramatically the function of the affected side was if you allowed that animal to use, you pressured them to actively use the side that had the most difficulty. Okay. So that had come out, and I shared it with her, and I knew I'd seen the enriched environment studies. They were amazing. And, it was the active engagement of the organism. That was the key that caused the positive changes. And I mentioned that to her. I said, Jean, and she knew that when I went into my PhD program too, I was going to be critical. She told me that once. You're critical. You're very critical. And she didn't mean that in a negative way. Okay. She was just sort of stating a fact, So I was sort of open on, does this sensory integration stuff really work? I mean, I think there's something to it, but is the research going to support it when you really put it to the test? And of course it has. But I when I met with her, I said, I have been seeing this research. It completely supports your approach to therapy, and I think there's a lot to this. And her response was, I'll never forget, her words were, your words are encouraging. That's the first thing she said. Your words are encouraging, but my work is done. Okay. So, I'm glad I got to say that to her, that things are really looking good for your intervention, and it's only gotten better, with the clinical trials. And in my dissertation, I studied whether sensory integration could predict children's academic performance 4 years later, as the theory would, theory would kind of suggest that, and it did. It predicted 4 years later. It's amazing, especially praxis. So, and then all the other studies that have come up, it's just been very supportive of her theory and the effectiveness of her intervention. It really is pretty astounding.
And
Can I just mention
No, Shay, you're account. Just go on. I can handle it after.
Okay. I just wanted to mention or to read from the book 6 Perspectives in Theory, Kay Sieg's interview with Dr. Ayres, and she says, Dr. Ayres cites the problems of her clients as the central inspiration for her work, and then quote, they have certain conditions, responsibility for modification of which I assume. Therefore, I must learn what I need to know about to ameliorate their conditions. So all of her work, it wasn't like starting from the other side. She was starting from the child. And then what do I need to know? Even as Zoe mentioned, the equipment, she would describe to Franklin, we need something that we can do this, this, and this. And it would often be based on a kind of input a child that she was treating was seeking. And then Franklin and her would come up with a design, and then he would make it. So everything was like child-centered. Yeah, toward the child.
I was just saying that we reach our first 40 minutes. And so we start to talk about Jean Ayres, the scientist. And it amazes me that Dr. Ayres worked till the very, very end of her life on SI theory and on the SIP. She died in December 88, and the SIP was published in 89, right after that. So it's incredible. And so this is just to make us aware that for the first 40 minutes are done. So I think we should have a toast to Dr. Ayres' life and the great woman.
And her birthday.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody. We have
Cheers.
almost 400 people watching us from all over the world. And
That's amazing.
Welcome.
Thank
All
you,
right,
everybody.
so we are going to pause for just 2 minutes. So we'll pause for 2 minutes because we've got 2 more segments to come. So if anybody has to use the little girls' room or whatever.
Marco?
Little boy.
Let's
All right,
go.
welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you, Marco. Welcome back, everybody. So now this segment, we're going to talk about Dr. Ayres' work as a scientist. And I would like to turn it right over to Pivy because Pivy has some beautiful ideas and I'd love to share your ideas.
Thank you so much. I would like to start by asking, was Dr. Ayres much ahead of her time? And today, I'm sure we all can say, yes, she was. And like the work of many scientists, composers, painters, she had to face lack of understanding, misinterpretation, opposition, perhaps even jealousy. Like everybody who is inventing something different. And also, like another American scientist woman, Eunice Newton-Foote, she lived 100 years earlier than Dr. Ayres. And she discovered already 1856 greenhouse effect. It was that time, it was groundbreaking. And today, 170 years later, we live in a situation she predicted 170 years ago. But in her case also, as a woman, she wasn't allowed to present her findings in scientific conference, American Association for Advancement of Science, because of being woman. Probably in that time, in scientific world, there was too much testosterone and woman was not allowed to take part. And what's amazing, 3 years later, another researcher, man, presented similar findings and didn't even mention her name. That's what happens in scientific world. And we can say Dr. Ayres, who lived exactly 100 years later, born 1 year earlier, but they died the same year, but there was 100 years between. She was a researcher in the field of learning and behavior problems. And she was so eager to find out what was not working well in brains of these children. And as she developed also hypotheses, she did research, which she based on her wide knowledge of neuroscience and clinical practice. She was very special in her way, doing research and clinical practice. But in this way, she was very human because she saw things in reality, what she was studying. So it was extremely human. So the research and reality were bound together. But these hypotheses were not understood at that time. At the time, there was no research relating learning disabilities to sense or behavior problems to sensory motor functions. So there was no treatment programs either for these children having sensory processing difficulties. So what she brought us was something totally new. And that's why, because she was so much ahead, she was not well understood, not even among own profession, but she was a really hardworking woman. Despite of lack of support, she continued. She was a visionary, we could say. She had very strong belief that she was doing the right thing. And that was her main passion for her work. So was she ahead of her time? Yeah, she was so much ahead, like the other scientists and people who invent something new, that they are not understood the time they are living. They are appreciated now later a lot. And now we can continue, and we should, and she would be happy for that. That's what I...
Thank you, Ivy.
Thank you, Pivy. That's really beautiful. I know Suzanne probably can't talk because that was touching, and someone's talking about Ginny Scardina in the chat box, so that's going to put Suzanne out for a few moments. So we'll let her limbic system recover.
Okay, that's
And Pivy, I think that's really such an important point about she was ahead of her time, and she was so driven by ideas that she had because of what she could see.
Yeah.
And I think this combination of perseverance, like brilliance and perseverance against odds, which you're also describing in this other scientist. You know, what struck me is that Dr. Ayres had ideas that drove her that she couldn't ignore. She could see things in children, and it wasn't possible for her to set it aside. You know, for a long time, I wondered, how could she do these multiple things, be a researcher and a clinician and an educator? And finally, I realized that the only way she could really be a researcher was to also be a clinician. Exactly. Because she was so, her work is so embedded in the doing and, you know, her theory, but for herself, I think the reason she could have these ideas about sensory integration is that in her own body, she knew that she had to understand how bodies worked and nervous systems worked. And I remember when you came to study, and I think you were trying to learn maybe some of the American songs. And Dr. Ayres said, you know, it's really great when we have people who come from other countries who don't have necessarily the same English language skills, because the American therapists talk too much. And she appreciated that, you know, sometimes when language wasn't there, there was even more of a chance to have a connection through the doing. And that just was such a cornerstone of her work. And I remember you as such a wonderful therapist, and she loved watching you work and connecting with the children. And then you brought that spirit to Finland and built such an impressive program. So we owe you a lot for really being a model for organizations all over the world for how to take that work and introduce it in such a scholarly way, which was really important to her. So thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, when I started my studies, I had so little knowledge. I really had to start from very bottom, and the only way was to just observe and try to read.
Well, it was just right. You did just right. So, thank you. So, are you composed, Suzanne?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm, you know, Sue, what you were talking about some things from the frame of reference book, that original frame of reference book. Do you want to share? Do you remember you were talking about how when she started her work, and this was in the 50s and 60s, that she started to acknowledge other perceptual motor theorists who were working simultaneous with her?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. She was really working when she started the test. She had done the Ayres space test, and then she was working on the tactile test when I got involved with some of the teaching. But she always gave credit to other people who were also looking at various aspects of perception, as it was known in those days, and would cite them like Frostig and Kephart. She wasn't really, you know, taking things from them, but she was kind of studying the same thing, but wanted to get under the visual part of it down to what's going on in the brain and the body, because she felt that you had to go back to the body in order to really understand the visual perceptual kinds of things. So that was one of the things in the beginning. And she would, she'd had a problem. It was amazing to me because she had a problem that she looked at and she developed a test for it. And then she was saying, well, this leads to that result, but we need a test for that. And then she went back and kept going. And those first tests were all standardized at different points in time. So you could see how her mind was going in terms of theory and looking at the problem, the visual perceptual problem, and then going back in terms of praxis and tactile and vestibular and everything. And at the time, every time she came out with a new test, that was what everybody was focusing on at the time. And then something else would come out and all of a sudden, oh, it's vestibular. Everything was vestibular for a while. And then, she kept going with the praxis test, the new praxis tests. And so, it was really interesting how that development was, in where you could kind of read her mind and where should she go next. She knew, but it was really very interesting to see that progression. And that turned out to be one of the problems with the old test was they were all standardized on different populations at different times. So when the SIP was developed as a test of 17 tests, then it became even more valuable because it was all standardized together. It was really interesting. But she started out her I guess it was maybe her dissertation was on proprioception, blocking on the words, but the theory of and I'm blocking, I'm sorry, but it was much more a physical proprioceptive kind of thing, neuromuscular facilitation, those were the words. And then also body scheme, and then some of the visual tests. So she was not really in the sensory integration in her very early research, but it was motor. It turned out really in terms of motor planning and tactile and vestibular, but they were not known to be a cause at that time. So,
Sue, the complexity that you're talking about, I think, is one of the reasons that she had such strong feelings about graduate study.
mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that everyone here knows is that she was always really encouraging occupational therapy to move towards graduate level study. And I don't think it was just for the label. She knew that this work was complex and it required systematic programs of research, which she started, and I think we've seen people emulate, and it's that kind of work that's really moved things forward.
And with the original courses, required that you either had a master's to take the courses or that you had taken neuroanatomy and statistics, because she felt like that was really important to even before you even started taking the test. I think, Päivi, you talked about her, what she told you with starting the programs in Finland.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or
Yeah,
when you were going to come, to study.
Yeah, but there's some parallel tracks. One of the things that she said, and I think we've quoted it in a past publication, was that having a PhD gave her the autonomy to be an independent professional and to think like a professional. And she didn't find what she needed in OT to develop as a scientist. She had to go outside of OT. Now, she found what she needed in OT to be a practitioner, to do those activities that were helpful. But later in this essay on professionalism, one of the things that she said is that she felt like a technician early in her career by doing activities, but not feeling like it was adequately grounded in theory. And she said, so I gaining the skills to become a researcher as a psychologist, she was developing the theories that she would need to give her the grounding for whatever those methods were that you were using. And I remember one time somebody wanted to do a kind of a recipe, an activity book in sensory integration. And it was when I was studying with her, and she was like, Suzanne, we're not doing this and I don't endorse it. Therapists need to know what they're doing and why. They can't just use a cookbook. We are not, you know, you have these people, we're not doing that. And you know, it was like, whoa, whoa. She had a lot of emotion behind it. And I know at the time, but going back, it was because she was frustrated as a clinician doing these things, but not knowing deeply enough. And I think that must have motivated her in her assessment development and her research development, because it wasn't just, okay, now you have to assess, but it's like who is this going to work for? And she really wanted to know, like, who does it work for and who does it work best for? Because we only have so much time. We have only so much space in the clinic, and how much time do they need to be here? And she was asking those questions. She didn't feel like she had the answers. She wanted to find the answers through her data collection.
Oh, yeah. Also, you know, when I was at the clinic doing OT 610, so I was so lucky her giving time to plan the Finnish SI training program. And as you told, the most important fact was that in Europe, including Finland, OTs didn't have master degree. And that was a starting point. We had to start, you know, planning that if they don't have this background where to build SI training, we have to study more to understand this complex theory, because otherwise it looks like a play, as we know. So we had to put many more hours on neuroscience, and we had to put many more hours on statistics, and also clinical practice, that was mentored. So at the end, our program was 12 weeks full-time theory training. And after that, you know, having supervised clinical practice. And I can say it was needed. It was really needed. It was good advice. And Dr. Ayres, she put a lot of emphasis on good training. Really, without this, if you don't have a master degree behind you, you really have to have extremely good training to understand this theory, to trust, and not picking up here something and picking up there something, because so much is offered. But if you have a good training, you will stay there. And probably I lost the picture, but it's okay. You can hear anyway. And the warning words she gave me was, keep the level high. Don't do the mistakes which are already done. And it depends on the knowledge of the therapist that they will really learn this approach. And learning this approach is a lot of work. You have to be prepared. And the participants of the SI course, they have to know that they really have to work hard, but it will be rewarding. And that's how it was. What else to say? And also, I had to say that she took, despite of being so, there was so much clinical work, research, tutoring, or teaching what she was doing, but she kept on contact. A couple of times a year, she was writing, and she was eager to know, how are they doing? And she wanted to tell how things were over there. And that was amazing. And I was so glad to tell her that SI training, it raised the value and appreciation of pediatric OT. I have to tell you, it is still doing so. So, and in the beginning, when I enrolled the program, I wanted to study SI without knowing anything. But she was a person who made me to go to USC and study my master. And at that time I was, oh gosh, I have to spend so long time and so much energy and so much money, and first do my master's, and after that being able to study in a clinic.
Nauseating instances of corrupt government favoritism, the United
Something else. But
That wasn't me.
now I understand extremely well why we really have to have extremely good training. And this is, in many countries, still OTs don't have master's degree. So the training has to be really tailored to the level of their knowledge. So I'm extremely thankful for her. She put me to do my master's degree.
Well, I think that that's a good lesson for all of those countries, people where maybe OT is either at associate or bachelor's level or uneven levels of education, not proficiencies, but that, in the postgraduate training, there's a reason that we have some level of rigor in the educational process. And I think not only in Finland, but in other countries, we've seen OT professionally elevated because of what they learn specifically from sensory integration, but how you take that template into other aspects of your professional life and other frames of reference that you're using, that you should have a solid theory base, you should use really rigorous assessments, you have to clinical reasoning, you have to do very customized intervention processes, and that clinical reasoning, I think, elevates professionally. But one of the things that we haven't talked about, maybe just a few minutes, is that, despite the rigor of her work and the, being such a, visionary, which we're going to go into, and, she was way ahead of her time, especially in OT, and producing research that other OTs weren't doing at that time, if you look at the journals. Her work was criticized, and do we want to spend a few minutes on that? Because I think that that's an important part of her legacy, was how difficult it was for her, even with all of that effort, to be accepted.
I'd like to talk a little bit about that. I think that the basis for sensory integration theory is that these children who have these problems, there's a neurological basis for it. And with sensory integration treatment, we are able to influence or change or modify their processing of sensory information. Well, during the time that Jean Ayres was alive and was developing this theory, it was very hard to test this theory, to say, are there really differences in the brain? And I think she got a lot of criticism because we're just OTs, we're not doctors, and we're saying something's happening in the brain, and we're saying we're influencing the brain when we're not documenting it, we're not empirically studying it and supporting that. I think the technology did not exist at the time that she was a researcher and that she was alive. The technology now exists, and a number of people are talking and looking at the underlying basis. We've shown, starting I think with some of Lucy Miller's work with the sensory laboratory, that there are true differences in how children process information. And we're now looking at, there are a number of people, not just OTs, but a number of people, especially since sensory has been added to the autism diagnostic criteria, that are now showing that children actually do respond differently to sensory input, and to tactile input, to auditory input. And so a lot of the research that's happening now is supporting her hypotheses from previously, which was not possible before. And so when Heidi was talking about was Ayres ahead of her time, she was ahead of her time in that her theories at that time couldn't be tested. I think she'd be so happy to see what's happening now, and to really see that one can actually look at how children are processing sensory information from the body senses, and to see that there really are true differences. And I think our next step is to really show that these differences can be modified. And I know at least there have been a number of papers that have actually come out showing some of that. And there's another work in progress that is showing that, looking at the effectiveness of intervention on both behavior and neurological processes. So I'm excited.
Sure, and especially connectivity. There's a lot emerging in that area now. I wanted to mention that I wouldn't have gotten a PhD if Jean Ayres had not encouraged me to do that. And she was also my sponsor in that program. And I did let her know, you know, I'm not sure if I'm going to want to pursue a career, you know, in sensory integration. And, you know, I want to find out, you know, is it really on track? And she was very supportive, you know, of that. By the way, in preparation for this event today, I went over some materials I have from her years as a student, as an OT student.
My.
I'm being conspiratorial. I'm telling you these secrets. Okay. So she did, I mentioned this to the other speakers the other day, that she had written a very formal letter once about how in some settings, occupational therapy was not professional and that it needed to be. And I think that was a real passion of hers, was making sure that we raise those standards so that it would truly be a profession with a knowledge base. And so that's where the theory was so important, and then doing the research to construct and to test the theory. So that, I think she was driven by that. By the way, something I didn't realize until I was looking at these papers, she did 3 years of college as an art major. And now many of us know that she did lovely painting. She was a painter. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Zoe. Right. Yeah. And in her reviews by her fieldwork, written by her fieldwork supervisors, you can imagine, most of them said this is an extremely conscientious student. But one of the fieldwork supervisors also commented that the background in art probably was helpful for her in terms of sitting back and observing. And, you know, so much of the therapy is an art. It's not a visual art like painting, but there is an artistic quality very much. So she's such a fascinating person because of that blend of the art and the hardcore science, and wanting to pursue the truth. I think, you know, and one of my favorite sentences that she wrote happened to be in the Blue Book, Sensory Integration and Learning Disorders, I think is the name of it, back in the early 70s. And the sentence I'm thinking of is, truth, like infinity, is to be forever approached but never reached. So that really, I think, drove her desire for finding out, for doing the research to find out what is really true, how is the best, and then how to use that information to best help children who are struggling. So she knew no one will know the ultimate in terms of truth, but that it was important to pursue that and it was a life project for her to do that, to pursue truth through her research, developing her theory and testing it.
She also was criticized because her theories kept changing,
Mm-hmm.
and it kept changing because it was a theory. And as she studied more, as she learned more, she was able to incorporate more into the sensory integration theory. So the initial set of tests did not have a vestibular posterior nystagmus test, and so she didn't have that as one of the underlying potential problems. But then as she learned more and added that test, she was then able to revise and modify the theory to include that information. And so people who were criticizing her work because it kept changing, it was like they really didn't understand what theory was.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Well,
She,
go ahead, Diane.
Oh, I was just going to say something that hasn't been mentioned. I'll just make this quick. Is that after she finished her PhD, she did a postdoc, which OTs, she was probably the first OT to ever do a postdoc study. That's where you finish your doctoral degree and then you do further study with researchers at a university. So she was at University of California, Los Angeles. At that time, the name of the neuroscience area was the Brain Research Institute. And I remember her saying that when you are in those meetings discussing the research, don't bother to bring up human beings because it was all animal research. And no one wanted to stick their neck out and try to generalize to humans.
Wow.
But she still took in the knowledge, and got the research skills. Yeah. But yes, it was hard for her because she was attacked. I think part of it was sort of, how dare you, a woman and an occupational therapist, have the gall to go out and think that you can construct a theory and do research. And she was attacked sometimes publicly and criticized. It must have been terrible, but she persisted because of that quest for truth that she was committed to.
Well, I think that it continues to be one of the dilemmas for using sensory integration, that what she did is she tried to connect the neuroscience with occupation and occupational performance and co-occupations, those things that you do. So for the neuroscientists, it was never going to be deep enough. And for the occupational theorists, it was never going to be occupational enough. But for me, this is a transaction between what Lorraine was calling the small, getting really deep into the smaller, minor particulates, and then going large. Like, how do you tolerate your world, your sensory world? You have a sensory body and you're in a sensory world. And so I think that traversing the big and the small was something that sensory integration theory does for us. But it's criticized on both ends of that spectrum. But I think she was onto something. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Marco, shall we pause our second
Yes.
section? Waiting for Diane. Should we go ahead and relaunch?
I'm here.
Yeah, she's here, I think.
Oh, Diane's here?
Here.
Okay, there she is. All right, we're back, everybody. Round 3. So, and actually, at our little breaks, Steve, it was so nice to hear some of your thoughts. So we'll hear more of them. And yeah, let's talk about Dr. Ayres as a visionary. Zoe, do you want to get this section launched?
Sure. I mean, I think we've been touching on a lot about how she could see things moving forward. I think one of the things I wanted to get into this last section was to just talk a little bit about, is it okay if I mention the vision now? Is that okay?
You go.
Okay, so I just, for everyone I'm not sure everyone who's listening, but probably most people who have joined us know that we have had an initiative for the last 6 years. We had this idea in 2014 to launch the Ayres Sensory Integration 2020 vision, of course, in our little American way, thinking that 2020 vision was such a cute name because we use that for acuity, visual acuity, not knowing that that's not how everyone in the world talks about vision. But at any rate, we set this initiative because we recognize that in this year, 2020, Dr. Ayres would have turned 100 years old. And we were thinking about, well, you know, that's a significant year. We should celebrate in some important way. And of course, from what you've heard about Dr. Ayres, focusing on the work would be the only way that she would have wanted us to commemorate a milestone like this. She certainly wouldn't want us to be, you know, overspending time just talking about her. So the initiative was launched in 2014 in beautiful Finland. Thank you, Päivi, and the hosts for having us, and beautiful Naantali. And just in reflecting, we set 3 goals, I think, again, in the spirit of Dr. Ayres being very goal-oriented and knowing that if we were going to move forward, we needed to be systematic. And I think in thinking about these goals, which were around the idea of scholarship, comprehensive assessment, accessible comprehensive assessment, and standards for education, that really all of these goals were not only goals to be achieved by the year 2020, which I think, I mean, maybe technically we may or may not exactly reach the goals as the way we articulated them, but in so many ways, I think we have exceeded these goals, that we have actually been able to have a publication like the one that came out from the Frank Porter Graham Institute that, you know, now lists Ayres sensory integration as an evidence-based practice. That was really what we were looking for in our goal 1, that does the literature, by the year 2020, does the literature support that this is an effective approach, and that between the randomized controlled trial studies and that that publication, I think it's amazing to me that that came out in this year, in 2020. And then, of course, with our goal number 2, the development of the evaluation in Ayres sensory integration, I think we are all really still in awe of the fact that, you know, over 100 countries joined us in this effort, that we have made so much progress. We have 20 tests, thanks to our fellow authors, Suzanne and Diane, and Dr. Schaff, our research team, and all of the people who have contributed around the globe. We now have about 1,600 children tested. We have 1,800 testers actively training and preparing to test children from pretty close to 100 countries. And again, having the test, that's not the goal, is just to have the test. The goal is, again, moving forward, being able to use these tests to keep growing this theory base, which we will be able to do now, not only, you know, not only with a set of tests that were only standardized in the United States, but now with tests that have global norms and have been adapted culturally. We just submitted a revision of a paper. Oh, I guess I'm not supposed to say that, maybe, because reviewers could be listening. Anyway, we're moving forward. We have a lot of papers in development. And then the third goal related to having standards around education, we talked a little bit last week about the International Council for Education and Ayres sensory integration. That was our way to achieve goal number 3, so that we could have international standards that would be recognized worldwide. And again, that doesn't mean we have the goal and it's accomplished and we're done. It's just the beginning. All 3 of these goals are just the beginning, which I think in so many ways really celebrates Dr. Ayres, you know, really the core of how she thought. It's not about standing still and just finishing. It's about what's next. What can we do next to make things better for children, for families around the world? So that's where we are looking forward. I don't know what the next vision is and when we revisit it, but for sure we will revisit next year, celebrating 101 ways that Ayres sensory integration is moving forward.
Well, one of the things that struck me with Dr. Ayres and her work was that she was thinking, she was a large thinker. So while she was working on sensory integration, she was also supporting the development of the profession of occupational therapy. And I think that she saw in the future that if OT didn't change the way they were operating at the time, that we as a profession would be left behind. And so being a visionary isn't always easy. She met with some resistance because people don't necessarily want to hear that they're not doing things well or the right way, or that there's another way to do it. So yeah, I think it was hard for her to see so clearly so many things and meet resistance. So Steve?
Yeah, can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Marco. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying that when I was finishing my master, and my master thesis presentation, or I don't know what you call it in the US, but the supervisor made me a question. And the question was, you know, if Dr. Ayres was alive, what do you think she would be doing now? Where do you think she would be pointing? And I wish I could answer that question, but maybe you can, because you knew us so well, and you kind of, you know, keep on the track that she left. You keep with her legacy. So maybe before we go to Steve, because I want to hear Steve, but where would she be pointing now?
I've got to go with the rest of you. Lorene, can you tackle that one?
Well, one of the things that I have thought about, and I said before, is that as a statistician, she would be finding ever new ways to number crunch the huge, vast amounts of information that you're collecting in every country. And how do you break down? There are so many factors that affect not only children's lives, but people's lives. There's starvation, there's war, there's trauma. There are people who are displaced. There are, and whether you're talking about this country and the huge homeless population, the number of children that are living in cars, how does this impact what happens to children? So I don't have any idea how anyone would do that, but I think the statisticians will have to expand their ability to number crunch on a vast level. And the other thing that I would mention is that sensory integrative dysfunction doesn't stop with children or start with children. As a person ages, we have increasingly new sensory integrative problems, whether it's the tactile system that breaks down and you can't hold things, you drop things, whether it's vestibular compromised, people lose sight, they lose hearing. So the study of aging, sensory integrative issues with aging, has to be added to the issues of people in trauma or children in trauma, families in trauma. So how do you study families as families, not just children? Anyway, those are some of the things that I've been thinking about.
Oh, great. Thank you, Lorene.
Anybody else want to tackle that one?
I'll say something. I agree with Lorene, being an aging person, that things are different, you know, and I happen to have peripheral neuropathy from chemotherapy at one point in time. So what struck me was that how much my proprioception was compromised.
Oh, yeah.
By that, not just tactile, and I still have
Right.
vestibular and vision, but proprioception was involved, and it's something that I really, struggle with, and use a stick when I'm out and about, not at home, but I'm always trying to think of ways to tackle that problem therapeutically in my exercises and activities and other things. So I think, yeah, the aging population is really an interesting one. And as we age, it becomes more interesting. So I think Jean might be thinking that way too.
Right, and it's never the same. It's not the same. The development of sensory integrative functions in children have a sequence. The loss of things, and I certainly agree with you, Sue, about proprioception. I struggle with proprioception. I struggle with balance. I couldn't walk across a 2x4 now. I'd fall over. And there are just so much information needs to be gathered in this area that I think it'll be in the next 100 years where there's going to be huge advances. And I'm not sure how much will come back. A lot of it will with effort, but some of it just doesn't.
Doesn't come back.
Right. Got to live with it.
We're all on that train.
Yep.
I think
Well,
Ayres would be encouraging people to get PhDs and go into careers in research. I think that's something that she really would be embracing and really saying this is essential. I think she would definitely support the move to an entry-level OTD, but then would say that's not enough. Once you're there, then begin to think about doing research and consider a PhD for careers in research, because that's the way to keep information about sensory integration moving forward, and also continuing to be within the domain of occupational therapy and not within the domain of psychology or neurology.
Yep.
Don't you think she'd be so proud, or I don't know what the word would be there, but she would really be amazed to know how much of her theory is being used in normal development, that we've moved away from it only being important concepts that are used for children with deficits or populations with deficits, that these principles are just so important for just well-being overall. I think her passion would tend to go towards helping everyone achieve their goals in life and be as productive as they can. But I remember when she was redoing the Southern California Sensory Integration Test to the SIPT, and she was disheartened by the MAC scores that were on both of those, the motor accuracy scores. And she really felt that the sense that children were not moving as much as they used to. And that was before the introduction of all the video games that we see everybody stuck with now, or in carriers, right? We think that children are always being lugged around in carriers that are young infants, how important those concepts are. So I think for the future, just this overall thing and I think as we get older, that still fitting in movement in whatever ways you can and tolerate it would help maybe slow some of these issues that come up from that as well. So I would see her looking at how sensory integration concepts affect us all.
I remember being at a restaurant with Pat Wilbarger, and there was a child at the table next to us, and the child was in one of these seats. I don't remember what you call them, where they walk. It's rolling, and Pat said to the family, "Take the child out of that and put a potted plant in it." And then went on to expand why it was not good for children and why movement was so important.
That sounds like that.
Great. Well, in one of the essays I read from Dr. Ayres, she was very clear. She was always had a lot of clarity about her theory, and that She was taking into account the neuroscience of human behavior and the contributions to learning and the way a person exists and functions in a sensory world. And one of the questions posed to her was, well, who is this for? And she said, it's for anyone with a vertebrate brain, and every human has a vertebrate brain. And she went on to say, well, sensory integration isn't everything, but it's really the place to start with everyone. And so she wasn't restricting to an age group or a certain diagnostic group. She was really looking at humanity and how that affects humanity.
For me, sensory integration helps explain child behavior. And so looking at why children are behaving certain ways, how they're behaving, what factors are influencing them, why they're irritable, all of the things I think really come back to understanding sensory integration. I think it makes a huge difference in just typical children understanding behavior.
Yeah.
I think it also affects animals, any vertebrate. You don't have to limit it to people. And I don't know in the next 100 years how things will advance, but if we have the technology, I think they're going to start looking at all kinds of animals, all the way down to fish, to look at sensory integrative issues, problems, and ways of remediating difficulties. I think it's wide open where the next 100 years could go.
Steve, I want you to jump in here. I don't want to run out of time and we didn't get to meet you. So could tell us a little bit about why you're even here. how did you get roped into this?
Well, actually, it all began very long ago when Zoe and I worked together with a program for autistic youth. But after leaving and moving to New York, Zoe invited me to come back, and this was 30 years ago, to interview for the job as executive director of SII. And it turned out to be great timing. I moved from New York and running the Long Island Food Bank back to California, and I had grown up in Manhattan Beach. And I had just an absolutely fabulous experience over the 3 years that I was at SII. I mean, I do want to really say how generous of spirit all of the occupational therapists were for me as we were going through a really difficult time of putting the SIP training in place. It required all kinds of work by so many therapists to get together and develop. You, Suzanne, you were heroic and going off and marching at the last minute's notice off to do trainings. It was really incredible, all the work of the clinic and how just fascinating that was for me. And also, I'd like to take just a moment to recognize Irene Bagg and all of the work that she did as a graphic designer and as a temporary head of SII. I mean, she really put her heart and soul into it for a number of years. And without her help, it would have been just impossible for me. So, she was an angel and guidance for all of the publications that we worked on. And I found that just, really just a great assistance. But also I'd like to say just a little bit about Jean. I mean, I did not know her well. Her health was already severely compromised when I came. She was going through the work with WPS, and it was very difficult. She was having a lot of trouble, working with staff there, doing the statistics involved in the tests, working on the computer scoring. And in the conversations I had with her, I mean, it makes me almost want to cry now, because she was so worried that she wanted to complete her work before she died. She was so invested. There were so many hurdles. She'd worked so long, and she was using every bit of life force she had to participate in this and to guide it and to try to be gentle with it and to make the compromises that were necessary for WPS to, you know, move a product forward that they could feel good about, and also that would be financially beneficial for them. And it was just a terrible, terrible process. And, you know, she would share that with me. And, you know, I think that it was very, very gratifying for her that she got as far as she did with this. And I really felt that she felt that it was in good hands with all of you to carry that forward. I never heard her do anything but feel proud of her work and the work that all of, you know, particularly the younger women that she knew. And, you know, I believe that she felt it was all going to work out. And she had her work to do, and she was completing that. And I think given all of the situations, it worked out as well as it could have possibly worked out. And so, you know, it's really special for me to be able to, you know, revisit this, you know, 30 years later and see all the work that's been done. And you know, I see everybody's face and their smiles, and you know, that as a group that you've worked so well together for so long and carried this forward. And I'm hoping that I can loop around, because of the work that I do with Lorene and with Dooley Brown and our work with sustainable agriculture and developing open source, actually collecting open source designs from around the world that are efficient and effective, that maybe we can bring that skill set to occupational therapists around equipment that they would like to share the designs for around the world that have been found to be effective by the therapists who've used them and developed them. And so perhaps we can find a way to work together again in this next decade on that.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm sure that you've heard that we've all heard Dr. Ayres say that the best thing that ever happened to SII was Steve Lino. And she so appreciated your leadership and your guidance at that critical time. So you have a special place in our history of sensory integration. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I have bad news.
Oh no, already.
Yes.
Oh,
But,
really?
you know, I've been reading the chat box, and everybody's so thankful for your time, all of you, for sharing these stories and especially for continuing the legacy and work of Dr. Ayres. And I have to say, and because I know I'm talking in behalf of more than 300 people, thank you so much. And I actually just today I had this drink with a girl, she's now a girl, an adolescent, that was treated with this theory, you know, OT and SI approach. And it's incredible to see the benefits after all these years. So thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you, Marco, and to all of you. You know, we are just so thankful and honored to be part of this community, all the hardworking people around the globe who are dedicated to helping children and families and all vertebrates and all nervous systems be understood.
Well, thank you, everyone. Ayres Sensory Integration is an enormous gift. Dr. Ayres did the heavy lifting for so many years with us, and you know, we were privileged to know her. We don't take that for granted, and have done our best to carry on the legacy. And we're getting ready to hand it over, Marco. The
No
next
pressure.
generation, I see the next generation talking to each other in the chat room, but there's, you know, like Ayres said, there's a lot more to do. There's a lot more to do. So we'll do the best we can to keep going while we've got a project with Lorene, and now we've got a project with Steve, and we've got projects with each other with Pivy. I think maybe just because we love working with each other as much as we love the theory and practice. So what do we do now? Do we want to do our toast and then
I think we have to say happy birthday, but I don't
Yes.
want to light my
Can I ask? Yeah, okay, Diane is on video now, because now people are seeing all your faces together on a screen.
Okay.
This will be nice.
Are you going to take a picture?
I will. But I just want people to see everybody singing happy birthday.
Oh,
At the same time. Here we go.
We're gonna sing.
Are we singing? Are we singing or no singing? No singing.
It's singing.
It's just blowing.
I'm going to light my match.
Okay.
Just blowing. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I think blowing candles out on a cake is something that's old century after this pandemic, right?
I know it's a solitary occupation.
Well, don't forget, stay positive, stay connected, stay safe. We really, really, really hope we're going to see everyone next July in beautiful Redondo Beach. We're planning on it. Let's all put our thoughts towards a solution. And in the meantime, we're going to keep going. We're going to make this vision a reality and keep going.
Stay tuned. Watch your journals. There's articles coming out, and stay with the Classy website. As we get these projects launched, we'll post it on the website. So anyway, thank you one and all. Love you. Happy birthday, Jean.
Cheers.
Happy birthday.
Dr. Ayres.
Hey. I know what I wished.
I know what I wished.
I know what I wished. I took 3 wishes.
You had 3 cakes, you can do.
I know, and I don't need to eat any one of those. That's part of that white hair problem.
Okay, just let me tell people that, you know, this is the last one down Wednesday. And it's a season finale. But everyone wants to watch the previous ones and watch the replay of this one. They can do it on Classy YouTube page, on the Classy website. And we are working on some podcast with this, the voice of the, you know, just the sound, so they can go and drive in the car or just do some jogging and listen to this educational conversations. So stay tuned. It's gonna be great.
All right.
Thank you for all your help, Marco and Katie.
It's
You guys
such a
have been
pleasure.
amazing. And to
Thank
all
you.
of our friends, we love you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.